Developing musicianship online.
Hello, and welcome to DM Online. Today, we're going to explore compression, and we're going to work on a technique for learning compression better, learning how it operates within the environment of Logic Audio. Now, Logic Audio provides an interesting element that Garageband does not have in terms of compression, and allows you to much better visualize what your compressor is doing. So I'm going to show you some techniques for how to get your compressors to put output into another channel so you can visualize how it's affecting the work that you're compressing. So let's get into it. On the screen now are 4 graphics, all produced using Logic Audio. The first one is literally the recording of the walking bass for the opening theme music. And you'll notice that there's variation in size. One of the use of compressors is to even out the differences so that you don't have such extreme change between the volumes. So if you look at bass heavy, it's exactly the same bass line as original, but it appears to be much more equal in terms of the size of the waveforms. Now the 2 graphics down the bottom is also the original and then the compressed version, but they're overlaid. And again, this was done using the Logic Audio process. You'll see on the first one, it's got the brown overlay, which is the vocal limiting, and the blue is the original popping out underneath. And then the other one is the heavy bass being overlaid with the original as a red image. So you'll see that graphically we can represent what our limiter or our compressor is doing, and therefore we can learn how to model our compression based on what our needs are. So first of all today, I'm going to show you how to achieve those models of your compression. And this involves the buses that we talked about in the first and second episodes of the Logic Pro, which was, I believe, episode 26 and 27. So what we want to do is we want to bus the signal out to another channel where we're going to record what it is we're actually getting. So I would loop a section. So this is my bass line here, looped. Okay, and then I would go to where the substation is, and instead of going to bus 11, which is where I'm actually outputting the signal, we would go to another bus. And I can see from my list of buses that bus 14 is my next available spot. However, we're not going to use the auxiliary that was just produced. We need another audio track that can record enable. So I'm going to add a track. It's going to be an audio track. But this time the input is not coming from outside. The input is bus 14. Okay, and then we create it. Now at this point in time, the auxiliary that was created is actually getting in our way, so we can get rid of that. Okay, and we should find that there is a bus 14 enabled channel now created, which we can call test compression. And now we need to actually drop our compressor in. But first of all, you're probably going to want a copy of the original waveform, the way it's coming out at this point in time. Because we've already added some effects and amplification stuff. So what we actually recorded originally is not the shape of the waveform at this point in time. So I'm just going to record enable it, solo the part that I want to actually record, and hit record, and you should see it appear on the next new channel. Now, one of the other good things in Logic is you can really zoom in on your waveforms and have a good close look. So you see from the original how much stronger the signal was now, and actually I've already flattened out a lot of the volume through compression in the amplifier and things like that. So it is already partially compressed. So you may like to keep that as a record of how it looked to start with. And then from there you could just reproduce the same track and make sure that's record enabled. Now, perhaps one of the best things to start looking at in terms of the effect in which it has is your limiter, which we already applied to our mix. But when we applied it, we didn't really look at what the limiter was doing. So I'm going to just attach the limiter to my bass channel and see what effect it actually has on the bass channel. Now you remember we looked at getting 3 decibel gain reduction when we added the limiter. So we need to find that same common ground. If the limiter has no gain reduction, then all it is doing is turning everything up. So when the gain reduction happens, that's where anything that's gone over the threshold we've set so the threshold is the 0.5, negative 0.5 decibels. Anything going beyond negative 0.5 decibels is reduced. So hence we're actually flattening out the volume changes in our track. So you need to run your track to find out what the gain reduction is and then work on that -3 to sort of flatten out your track's volume a little bit. So at the moment there's no gain reduction, so I'm not loud enough. Okay, so I should be about 3 decibels of gain reduction. Now remember, we mixed to -18. We didn't mix to 0. When we master output, we're mixing to 0. So this is what's happening in a master output. This is not what you would apply to your track prior to it going out of the system as the final, because you want to keep that headroom in your track. But this is as if the bass part was our final output. So let's try it. So you can see that the track has obviously gained a lot of volume, but also the way in which these slightly louder moments in the bass part pop out from the original, now they're not popping out to such extremes. There's almost an evenness between the louds and the softs. Now, like I said, this is not something I would apply at this point in my mix. I want to keep it at -18. So the role of the limiter is just that. It's to create a point in which everything stops getting louder and pull back things that exceeded that point. And that's one way in which a compressor is used. Another way is to add attack to something. So that means it really only hits the first attack and not the rest of the wave. Now if you go to another test channel and in the dynamics select a regular compressor, you're going to get this type of generic compressor, and these compressors along the top have different settings depending on what type of compressor they are. So you'll see in this case we've got threshold, ratio, makeup, knee, attack, release. If you want to know more about exactly what these things do, go back to my Garageband episode on compression, where I pretty much spend the whole time dealing with what that actually means. But now that we're in Logic Audio, we've got the knobs to adjust, which is a nice thing that's different from GarageBand. And we've got the graph of what those effects are. Now remembering that this dark section is really representative of the output that's going to happen. So if my dark section gets smaller, my volume gets smaller. And that's what compressors really do, they reduce volume. people use them to crank their volume up on their tracks. They have that effect, but actually in essence they stomp on the track and then bring everything up. So you'll see if I adjust my release, I'm getting more and more and more and more output, and then I can bring it down and I'm reducing the output significantly. Now that's not a setting there that we would be going for. But if you go to a different compressor, now we've lost one of our settings, and we go to a different compressor again, and we're losing even more settings. So depending on which compressor you use will depend on what level of control you actually have over your compression. Not only that, but there is lots and lots of presets. Now, rather than digging into all the different presets and what they do in this episode, I'm going to do a different episode and talk about applying a compressor in a way to create those effects I'm talking about, and also doing it in parallel, which is where you have one track that's a dry signal and one track that's a compressed signal, and then you mix the two together to give you that naturalness with the advantage of compression that you're looking for. But if we spend all our time today looking at the finer points of compression in this environment, then we will be here all day because it's a huge topic. Okay, so use this as a learning tool. Create extra tracks and run your compression through those tracks and look visually at what it's doing, and go through some of the presets and just try them on your track and see what effect it has on your waveform, and you'll start getting a lot more out of the compressors and understanding them much better. So I'm going to leave it there. Next time, parallel compression, and so a little bit more information on actually tweaking these settings. Okay, till then, thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.
BM, developing musicianship online.